Hi, this is Mark. Congratulations, you have found this amazingly awesome show. Chances are you're listening to it right now on whether it's iTunes or Stitcher Radio or some other mobile app that allows you to stream this amazingly awesome show to your ear holes. And I can't stress how awesomely amazing this show really is. But did you know that you can also catch the latest episode of this show on the Tangibound Network? That's right. Go check out tangiboundnetwork.com. You can look them up, and you can listen to it right there. It's even mobile friendly. What more could you ask for? Which means you can pull it up on your iPhone or your Android, even your Windows phone. Yeah, who has one of those? But still, point remains, you can do it. You can do it. Check it out, tangiboundnetwork.com. Listen to this show, the latest episode, every time. Check it out.
Hello, everybody. This is the MLBeers podcast with your host, Andrew Sherman. Philip Corwin is off tonight. He's busy at work, and, we haven't been here in 2 weeks because we've been busy. I've been busy with school and work, and, of course, Philip is busy with his job. So, anyways, during these past 2 weeks, a lot of crazy things have been going on, but let's get you up to date real quick. The Cleveland Indians have won 22 games in a row, and it was magical. I mean, what can you say about that? It was something really special. They got the win over the Kansas City Royals to make it 22, and now they are, in modern history, have the longest winning streak in the MLB. And if you really want to get into it, you could say that the New York Giants of 1916 has the record. I say that you're mistaken in a way, because there was a tie in the middle of it. They would have actually had a 12-game winning streak, and then a 16-game winning streak between those ties. And if you pay attention to soccer, it's not necessarily called a winning streak. It's called an unbeaten streak. And that's what I definitely believe that's what it was. It was an unbeaten streak that the New York Giants had, not the Cleveland Indians. I believe the Cleveland Indians got theirs fair and square. They won 22 games in a row, which has the longest winning streak in all of baseball. I don't know what else to say about it, because if you look back at it, having a tie in the middle would make it an unbeaten streak, not necessarily a winning streak. I think all the baseball historians need to go back and change that, but that's just my opinion. But last night, speaking of the Royals, even though one was about losing, we have Alex Gordon being the guy to pass the most home runs combined in a single season last night. Alex Gordon, he hit a home run against the Blue Jays, even though they lost, I believe, 5-2. But it was great to see that the home run record was beaten, which was set in 2000 with 5,693, which last night he broke that with, 5,694. But what's going to happen? There's still 2 weeks left. There's going to be a new record set and done. And a lot of people are thinking that the quote-unquote baseball is juiced. There's been a article by Ben Lindbergh on The Ringer about this, and the MLB higher-ups have denied that any of that has been happening. But also another weird take is that Alex Gordon, a guy that hasn't been doing well all year, breaks a record. So I guess he gets kind of a participation trophy in a way of dealing with that. But that's it. That's it with the news. That's pretty much it. So let's get to business, shall we? The Cleveland Indians and the Houston Astros clinched their divisions in the American League, and the Washington Nationals clinched their division in the National League. The Los Angeles Dodgers right now have clinched a playoff spot, but not necessarily the division yet. There's still a quote-unquote race going on in the National League West. So what's been going on? Boston hasn't clinched yet, and the Chicago Cubs haven't clinched yet. Well, if you look at what's been going on in the American League East, we have the New York Yankees, the only team that's left of chasing the Boston Red Sox, are only 2.5 games back, and their elimination number is number 9. But if you look at the National League Central, we have the Milwaukee Brewers only 3.5 games back, and the St. Louis Cardinals 6 games back. And if you look at the scores from today, the Cardinals are still up. The Cardinals are up 8-2 in the bottom of the 8th. The Milwaukee Brewers are up 4-3, which kind of helps them both, and especially not only in their respective division races, but also in the wild card. And the Yankees won today for the American League East side 11-3, beating the Twins, which kind of helps them in their wild card race. And to get to those real quick, in the American League East, we have the New York Yankees at an 85-67, which are 7 games ahead of the Minnesota Twins. The Twins are only a game ahead of the Los Angeles Angels, which they are 76-74. Then 3 games back are the Texas Rangers, 74-76. 3.5 games back are the Seattle Mariners. 4 games back, the Kansas City Royals, which are 4 games back behind the Minnesota Twins, I should clarify. And the Tampa Bay Rays are 4.5 games back, and the Baltimore Orioles 5.5 games back. So, on the National League side, Arizona and Colorado are still in the top 2 spots, but it's dwindled down a little bit more than what has been going on in the American League. The Milwaukee Brewers are only a half game back, which they might tie tonight with a win over the Pittsburgh Pirates. And then St. Louis is only 3.5 games back, which they might be 2 at the end of the night. So let's get down to this. I'm a National League guy. I love the National League. So let's talk about the National League real quick. Do I see the Chicago Cubs giving up their top spot in their division? No. Right now they're on a 7-game winning streak. They're 7-3. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They have done well on the road, on the road and at home. 46-32 at home and 38-34 on the road. And the reason why I also think they're not going to give up their spot is that their team batting a little bit better than the Cardinals and the Brewers. And just to give you the numbers real quick, they have a 266 batting average, 350 on base percentage, and a 425 slugging, which might be is better than the Cardinals. The Cardinals right now have a 235 batting average, 320 and a 409 on base and slugging. And for the Brew Crew, their slash line is a 240, 236 and a 408. And these numbers are all through the month of September. But what makes the Cubs different between the Brewers and the Cardinals is that they're just barely on the plus side of the weighted runs created plus at a 103, the Cardinals at a 91, and the Brewers, at a 93. But then if you look at their pitching though, it's a little bit questionable. They have a 4.47 ERA compared to for the Cubs, but if you compare it to the Cardinals or the Brewers, the Cardinals have a 3.30 ERA, and the Brewers have a 2.95 ERA. But the reasons why is that they're playing well. They're playing against teams that they can beat. I mean, they swept the Cardinals this weekend, which, some pundits have said that it shouldn't have happened because the Cardinals are, they're not bad, horribly bad, but they're not that great and would give them a fight. But they say that poor managing from Mike Matheny hasn't done well for them, but that's for a later date. But I'm here just to talk about the National League. And when you just look at these clubs, you have them so close to each other. Comparing K per nines, the Cubs are at 9.3, the Cards are at 9.06, and the Brewers are 9.5. And when you just look back at all of that, it's hard to say. It's, for some other people, it's hard for them to say, yeah, the Cubs are just going to flat out just start, punishing teams and win the division. I just see it as a clearer thing because if you look at the other stats, they've done well. If you look at walks per nine, they're still at a 3.52, which is still low, even though it's not like the Brewers at 2.16. They've just done what they need to be doing. So what about these other teams? What about the Cardinals? What about the Brewers compared to the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Colorado Rockies? Well, that's a different story. The Cardinals, per se, are better batting-wise through the WAR score. But if you really look at each individual stat, it's kind of a lie. You got the Cardinals with a 235, 320, and a 409 slash line. But if you look at the Rockies, they have a 265, 344, and a 444. Diamondbacks, 247, 320, and a 426. So how is this going to happen? The Cardinals are the only team that are pretty much out of it per se. Even though they're 6 games back in the wild card, they're 3 games back in the wild card, 6 back from the division. The reason why the Cardinals are not going to make it, even though they're an interesting team hitting wise, and definitely an interesting team pitching wise, it's just they just don't have the mojo, and that happens. And I didn't talk about pitching, but let's look at it here from a team perspective. 3.30 ERA, which isn't bad, but if you look at the Brewers and the Diamondbacks, 2.95 and 3.21 respectively. If you look at the Cardinals K per 9, they have a 9.06, which I've said earlier, but the Diamondbacks have a 9.62 and the Brewers 9.5. And this might be where it gets a bit troubling. If you try to look at how the Rockies have been doing, they're not doing so well with that. They have an 8.11 K per 9 and a 4.18 ERA. But how could the Cardinals make it to the playoffs? Well, let's take a look at their schedule real quick. I've said earlier that their schedule is probably the hardest thing, and it still is. Like I said, they've got swept by the Cubs this last weekend. They beat the Reds yesterday. It looks like they're going to beat the Reds tonight. They got to face the Reds. They got to face the Pirates. And how do you end up with the season? They got to face 4 games with the Cubs, which, again, the Cubs probably have the chance to sweep them, and then they end the year with the Brewers. And with that, it's going to be difficult for them to do anything. So I think the Cardinals are out in this situation. But what about the Brewers? They're about to possibly be tied with the Rockies. Is it possible for them to make it into the playoffs? Yes. And the reason why is that the Rockies right now are on a 3-game losing streak. They're, like I said earlier, they lost to the San Francisco Giants 4-0. But the Colorado Rockies haven't been doing much, even though they are facing easier teams. They've just finished their series against the Giants. They go on to play against the San Diego Padres, and then they got to face the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I don't think they're gonna give anything up. And before they face the Dodgers, they face the Marlins, which a team that's probably most likely, without a doubt, even though they're still quote unquote mathematically still in the playoffs, they're not anymore. And so that's where so looking at all of this, is there going to be any changes? Is there going to be anything else with that? And with the Rockies, I think they're going to miss out. I think the Rockies will miss out of the playoffs because they face a tougher schedule. And even though they do get to play, even though they do have the Marlins, they still got to face divisional foe, and that's where it kind of gets a bit tricky. With the Milwaukee Brewers, they got to face the Cubs for four games, and then they got to face the Cardinals for the last 3. They got to in the middle, they got to face the Reds. But the Brewers have given more of a fight than the Cardinals. And if you look at the numbers, the Brewers have better numbers, pitching-wise and hitting-wise. Even though the Cardinals rank 14th in the WAR rating with hitting, you could definitely tell that the team is better than the Cardinals because they have a 303 BABIP compared to the Cardinals' 277, and that's where it's going to be a challenge for the St. Louis Cardinals to do anything, and that's why it gives the Brewers an edge. The Rockies are going to falter, and the Diamondbacks are pretty much set. I don't think anybody is going to catch up to the Diamondbacks. Of course, they're 5 games ahead of the Colorado Rockies out of this moment, but they're going to be, 5 games ahead of Milwaukee. A lot of things are secured, and I don't think the Arizona Diamondbacks will try to take the Los Angeles Dodgers divisional spot unless the Dodgers just cataclysmic lose the rest of the season. But what's going to happen here? There's a lot of shakeup in such a small speck with the National League. But when you look at the American League, it's a different story. Of course, Boston has that nice little lead over the Yankees, 2.5. But again, like I said, that is little if you compare them, through batting. The Red Sox are not that hot. They're a 248, 306, and a 372. That's barely under 700. Usually you want to have 800. That's your key spot. But then you look at the Yankees. They've done well. 271, 349, and 465 with a BABIP of 301. The Red Sox have a BABIP of 301. But if you look at their WRC+, 76 is not going to get you anywhere. You have the Yankees at a 414. And that's where talking about this divisional race will definitely cause a stir for the wild card race and the wild card game, which is who is tougher, they playing Yankees at home or playing the Boston Red Sox at home. And right now they both have an equal record with a 46-28 for both teams. But that's where it becomes a bit of a hassle for any of the teams below them. You have the Minnesota Twins, they're one game ahead of the Los Angeles Angels. And right now, the Los Angeles Angels have not even started their game yet. It's actually in the warm-ups. But what keeps them alive is that they're facing the Cleveland Indians. The Angels are. And that's where it will get a little bit hairy and dicey for the Minnesota Twins. If they keep on losing, they're on a 3-game losing streak right now. They're going to be, facing the Los Angeles Angels. I mean, they're not going to be facing the Los Angeles Angels, my bad. But the Los Angeles Angels are getting real close. And kind of what's keeping this Angels safe, right under Minnesota and right above the Texas Rangers is that even though they have a 2-game cushion, the Texas Rangers and the Seattle Mariners are facing each other. So that could give, that will position those teams well into getting into those spots. Then you have the Kansas City Royals. They're 3 games back, even though they pretty much will win tonight's game. It's just that when you look at them, they have that 37-77 record. But again, closer look when you look at the numbers hitting-wise. The Royals, 283, 331, and 446, which is real good. But when you compare it to the Angels, it's better. But what has been going on is that the Royals haven't been taking a lot of walks, 6% to 9.6. Then you have the Royals kind of leading the K rate at 19%. At 15.2 to 19.3. But if you look at their pitching, it's, the Angels have the upper side of it. The Angels have a 4.72 ERA, while the Royals have a 5.62, and they're striking batters out more with an 8.5 K per 9, while the Royals have a 6.94 K per 9. So what about the other teams? Well, even though right now the Tampa Bay Rays are only 4.5 games back, they are beating the Chicago Cubs 7-1, and that's why it's such a hairy situation. But if you look at what the Rays have done hitting-wise, it's not been a great thing. 215, 274, and 372 slash line with a WRC plus of 70, a BABIP of 270, and a 6.6 walk rate with a 28.7 K rate. And if you even look on the pitching side, it's kind of flip-flop. They have a 3.76 ERA, a 9.18 K per 9, a 2.84 walks per 9. But this is where it kind of gets confusing. If you want Tampa, you got to have all your cylinders going. And if Tampa Bay isn't doing a lot of it, then what was the point? What's the point? You're not going to make it to the playoffs. And especially with the Baltimore Orioles, that's another team that has done decently well for themselves. They've lost 2 games in a row, but have shown competition because they only lost to the Boston Red Sox last night, 1-0. But if you look at their numbers, it's abysmal. 214, 267, 363 slash line, a WRC plus of 63, a BABIP of 259. But if you look on the pitching side, it's not that great either. 5.01 ERA with a 7.68 K per 9 and a 3.76. So if we're trying to look at this together, I'm saying Tampa Bay and Baltimore's out. Kansas City might be on their way out. Seattle and Texas, on the other hand, compared to what's been going on, with Minnesota and the Angels, the Texas Rangers, though, are, even though they're only 3 games back, they're not doing so well either. For a 246, 322, and a 442 slugging percentage, a 305 BABIP, a 97 WRC+, but if you compare it to the team that they're facing right now, the Seattle Mariners, 271, 336, 464 slash line with a 116 weighted runs created plus and a 306 BABIP. And again, if you're trying to compare these teams, we might already see what's going to happen. If you look, the Yankees are the best team that are a wild card team for the American League. They're number 4 in the list. Then the Twins, then the Mariners. So it might be going down like that. And that's where it's going to be, that's one of the difference makers on how a team might go to the playoffs or might not. And the Seattle Mariners again are a better team pitching-wise. 3.99 ERA with a 7.55 K per 9. Their FIP at the moment is a 3.90 compared to the Texas Rangers, a 5.84 ERA, 5.23 FIP, and a 6.5 K per 9. But another thing that's differentiating them is that the Mariners have a 71% left on base rate, while the Rangers have a 66.3. And also, too, their opponent BABIP is an 281, while the Rangers are at a 302. So that's the difference maker. So what about the individual performances? Who's going to be really the guy that's going to do well for them to really push them through, or, a guy that will need to be fixed? And right now, just going down the American League wild card, the Yankees at first, you got to think of Didi Gregorius, but if you really look at it, you have to look at Starlin Castro. Right now he has a 265, 292, and a 369 slash line. He only has a weighted runs created plus of 72. His on-base plus slugging, if you did the calculations, is only a 659. His ISO, I know he's not a big home run hitter, is a 103. But the thing is, he's swinging at 50% of the pitches and only making 76% contact, which the average is 80%. A guy that really needs to work on that. He hasn't, he's struck out 16 times and only walked once. He has a 22.2% K rate, 1.4 walk rate. And if you want to look on the pitching side, though, you have to really, you always got to worry about what's going on with just their normal pitching. And really a guy that has to do well is Masahiro Tanaka. Right now he has 2 wins and 1 loss, but the difference is he has a 5 ERA. He has a opponent's BABIP of 340. And even though he has a nice K per 9, walks per 9, he has a really high opponent batting average at 284, which is a difference maker between anybody. And what's interesting, he only has a 1.39 whip, which is pretty much who's left on base. But who would be the player for the Minnesota Twins? And you could obviously say Miguel Sano, but he's currently injured, and they don't even know if he's going to be back before the playoffs, and that's even saying if they get into the playoffs. But a guy that you have to also look at that was in talks earlier this season has to be Brian Dozier. Yeah, he has a 229 batting average. His on-base percentage and slugging are really good, get him over the 800 mark with that. But it's good that he's only swinging 34% of the pitches. 43% of the pitches, but he has a contact of 76.1, again, which is really low. He's struck out 13 times, only walked 8, which is another good thing. But the batting average, he could do a lot better. And a guy that's really, just right behind him is probably Jorge Polanco which he has a 242 batting average, 229 on base, and a 394 slugging, which is a 723 on base plus slugging. And also another thing too, between Brian Dozier and Jorge Polanco, they both have really low weighted runs created plus. Brian Dozier at 109 and Jorge Polanco with a 91. On the pitching side, I would have to agree that it might have to be Bartolo Colon, even though he's not their major guy out there throwing. But if you have a guy that's throwing 7.53 ERA, a 3.77 K per nine, a opponent's batting average of 267, which, yes, it is better than Jose Barrios, 294. It's not getting the job done. And the other guy is Jose Barrios too, with a 4.71 ERA, 4.49 FIP. It just shows that it's not going well for the Minnesota Twins, and that's why it's kind of a big thing, why we have to talk about individual players. And a guy to really, kind of look at for the Los Angeles Angels was a recent pickup, really, Brandon Phillips, a guy that is, well, actually, not Brandon Phillips, and not even a recent pickup, but you have to look at Adiraldon Simmons, their shortstop, 213 batting average, 237 on base, and a 279 slugging, which is a 551 on base plus slugging, and a 51 WRC plus. And I should also say about Brandon Phillips, sorry for flipping around, but Brandon Phillips is kind of in the same way. A 258 batting average, 270 on base percentage, and a 306 slugging, which he also only has a 54 weighted runs created plus, and they're both south of 300 in the BABIP category. But what about the pitching, though? You gotta do well, and the pitching, the one person that they really have to work on is a guy of Ricky Nolasco. And, pretty much everybody needs to work. I mean, Parker Bridwell and Tyler Skaggs all have high ERAs, but Ricky Nolasco, if I can speak, has a 5.28 ERA and the same number as his K per nine, which is really odd. Even though he has a lower ERA with Parker Bridwell, the second guy, it just shows that Ricky Nolasco has to do some work for the Los Angeles Angels. What about the Texas Rangers? A team that has done well. They've had injuries with Adrian Beltre, but the guy to really kind of look at here that is, hasn't done well is, Rogden Odor. A 179 batting average, 238 on base percentage, and a 375 slugging, which of course equals to 613 on base plus slugging. He's only had 2 home runs. His WRC plus is a 50, and he's only swinging at 48%, swinging at 48% of the pitches, and he is only making a contact of 74%. And so what about on the hitting, on the pitching side? And you have to give it up for Cole Hamels to be, staying around, but he's also the guy that needs to really work on it. He has a 4.81 ERA, a 4.96 FIP, even though he has a K per nine of 8.14, and he does have low opponent batting average and BABIPs. He has that 69.3 left on base percentage that does not help him out. So what about their opponents of tonight? I've already brought it up, the Seattle Mariners. And if you really look at it, you got to look at, a guy that's been kind of, in the shadows a little bit. He hasn't done much per se, and that's Nelson Cruz. Even though he has scored 11 times and he has 7 RBIs, he has a 274, 335 and a 403 slash line, which equals out to 778, which Kyle Seager and Mitch Haniger have better numbers. And also his WRC plus is a 114. And then I know you guys are like, all right, that's crazy. Why are you saying that? It's again, his K rate is a 26.4 and his walk rate is a 12.5, which is great. But he's struck out 19 times, and he's only swinging 44% of the time, and with a really low contact rate of 67%. So what about the pitching? And there's moments where you can't blame much of their pitching. They've had to go through many injuries. They've had Felix Hernandez injured, James Paxton injured, and that's really kind of hindered everything. So what about the new guy? The new guy, Mike Leake, that has somewhat have shown up to his new workplace, has a 2.13 ERA, a 1.77 FIP, a 1.07 WHIP, which he's done well. Little low on the K rate, but it kind of shows that he's doing really well when you compare it to the walk per 9 and K per 9, a 782 to a 0.71. He does have a middle range opponent batting average at 258 and a 333 BABIP, which doesn't sound good, but if you look at the other guys that have contribute, like Erasmo Ramirez, a guy that really needs the work, he has a 9.18 K per 9 and a 2.7 walk per 9, but he also has a 5.40 ERA, which does not look good on any type of scale. So on to the next team, the Kansas City Royals. They're, it's getting really close to seeing how this is all going to go down for them. And really a guy that needs to show up is Milky Cabrera. He's had 67 at-bats. He's struck out 6 times and walked 5, which he has at that time for this month of September are, single-digit K rates and walk rates. But it doesn't work when you're swinging a 224, 274, and a 343 slash line, and your WRC plus is a 60. And even though he's swinging 49% of the time, he's getting that nice contact rate of 89%. And for the pitching, though, for the Royals, it's kind of up in the air. And the reason why I say that is who needs to do better, who's really the guy that needs to push them. The guy that really needs to do better is Jason Vargas. Earlier in the season, he was lights out. He was part of the Cy Young conversation. Now he's not doing so well. In the month of September, he has an 8.25 ERA, a 6.57 FIP, and a 1.67 WHIP. And again, his opponent batting average is a 306. Opponent BABIP 316. He has a left on base percentage of 59%. But if you look at the other guys too, there's only 2 guys that are over the 70% mark, which is Sam Giolito and Jacob Junis, both respectively 88.2% and 84.9%. And also whenever Danny Duffy gets back, I think it will be a good addition, but that's still up in the air as of this moment. For the Tampa Bay Rays, a guy that really needs to shine in these moments has to be Lucas Duda. Actually, Corey Dickerson. I don't know why I said Lucas Duda. There's a bunch of guys that need work, but Lucas Duda, a 133, 170, 244. Lucas Duda, 157, 204, 451. Steven Souza Jr., .171, 170, and a .095. And that's the reason why I say that the Rays aren't going to make it. You look at the individual performances, and those are 3 key guys that are not helping them and could push them to the other side. And really, I don't think I need to talk about the pitching. I mean, of course, Chris Archer hasn't been doing well. He has a 9 ERA. He's been getting out of games early. He's been in 4 games already in September with only 13 innings pitched. So that's less than, that's 3 point something per game. Even though he has high K rate, that 344 batting average, that 415 BABIP is not looking so well for the Tampa Bay Rays. And for, just because I brought them up earlier, and even though they're, really have an outside chance, let's talk about the Baltimore Orioles real quick. And a lot of these guys need work. Chris Davis, 136, 239, 288. Slash line Tim Beckham, 171, 250, and a 368. And even though they're they're bombers, these guys aren't doing well either, and that's kind of the reason why they won't make it to the playoffs. And just a little quick look at the pitching. Wade Miley and Jeremy Hellickson haven't really helped them out. Kevin Gausman, kind of the bright spot out of all of this, has a 2.25 ERA, 9.38 K per 9, and a 2.25 BABIP. I mean, walks per 9, 290 BABIP. It just isn't enough for them to do well. So that's it for the American League, and I've already told you how I felt that, it's already set and done, and it's almost kind of set. The Angels have the opportunity of going up, which, that's kind of the key the key thing going on is watching the Angels, watching the Texas Rangers and the Seattle Mariners, which I'm hoping that the Seattle Mariners make it to the playoffs so I get at least one of my wild cards right, from my early season predictions. But it doesn't look like any other team. Texas Rangers are another team that are going to fight for that last spot. But the last 3 teams that I talked about, the Royals, the Rays, and the Baltimore Orioles, I think their seasons are over. So what about on the other side of the league, the National League? And, if you really look at it, you have to see from the pitching standpoint. Let's start with pitching first. And a guy that just needs to really work on it is Patrick Corbin. He has a 5.91 ERA, a 7.17 K per 9, a 4.64 walks per 9. He does have middle of the road opponent batting average at a 256 and a BABIP of 290. But his left on base percentage is a 62.5. But he's pitched the innings. Unlike Chris Archer, that's pitched only 13 innings in 4 starts. In 4 starts for Patrick Corbin, he has 21 innings pitched. So what about on the batting side? And that's going to be, that's a little bit difficult here and there. You can look at a lot of these guys and just be like, all right, this is the guy that needs to work. This guy needs to work. But Paul Goldschmidt, their key contributor, the guy that has won, that secretly wins MVP a couple years back, is hitting 154 at the moment, 200 on base, and a 288 slugging, which is a abysmal 488 on base plus slugging, and he's only has a 12 WRC plus. The guy, though, he's a little bit patient, but he's striking out a lot. He's been struck out 13 times. He has a K percentage of 23.2 and a 5.4 walk percentage, but he's still getting the RBIs. He's still getting runs in. He's not producing as well, only 8 hits. And what about the other team? The Colorado Rockies, a team, again, like I said, has been a little bit here or there. And the guy that really needs to work on it, and I think, it's kind of up in the air because the Rockies don't have like that set pitching starting rotation, but a guy that really needs some work is German Marquez. he's been, in 4 games, pitched 19 and 2/3 innings, but he has a 5.95 ERA. He has a strikeout rate of 778, strikeout per 9, a walk per 9 of 1.83, but his batting average and opponent batting average and opponent BABIP does not look good. A 344 and a 391 respectively, and a 68 left on base percentage. Okay, what about the hitting side though? Is there really anybody that needs to be worked on in a sense? And right now the only guy that really needs some work is probably Ian Desmond, but he's also switching out with Mark Reynolds, and the reason why is Ian Desmond only has 49 at-bats and Mark Reynolds has 48. But if you look at the other guys, Trevor Story is probably another guy that needs some work done. He has a 269 batting average, and I'm complaining about the guy because he only has a 98 weighted runs created plus. But if you compare to the others, like Nolan Arenado, Charlie Blackmon, DJ LeMahieu, 306 for LeMahieu. Blackmon has his 273, and Arenado has a 322. But I can't complain. The reason why I'm going for him instead of Ian Desmond is because he has 67 at-bats. He's struck out 20 times. He has a strikeout rate of 28.2 to his walk rate of 4.2. So that's where it gets a little bit hectic. A lot of guys are producing, and it's just a little bit of nitpicking from the other side. So what about now? We got to talk about the team that's right on their toes is the Milwaukee Brewers, which I'm pretty sure by now have won their game. Let's take a quick look at the score. And right now for that game, it's 4-all going into the bottom of the 9th against the Pirates. So what is making, this team click? And I bring up that Jimmy Nelson is injured. He's out for the year, out for the playoffs, out for everything. And that's where it's going to be kind of hard. And you got to have guys that will do well. And Zach Davies was one of those guys earlier in the season that was, doing well for them, but not now. He has a 4.32 ERA. Even though his FIP is a 2.85, that high ERA is not going to do well. He has a low K per 9 at 6.48, and his opponent's batting average and BABIP are 300 and 351 respectively. So what about on the hitting side of it all? You got to look at a guy that mostly has to be Travis Shaw. And the reason why is that he has a 217 batting average, 310 on base, and a 417 slugging, which is 727 on base plus slugging. But he has a really low BABIP at 250. He has a WRC plus of 82. He's struck out 19 times, which makes his K rate at a 26.8. And his walk rate at a 12.7. And what about the other guys? Eric Thames, he's only had 31 at-bats, but he's doing well at a 323, 417, and a 710 slash line. Ryan Braun has done well, 315, 413, 630 slash line. And so, and he's also had 54 plate appearances, at-bats. Another guy that you have to look at, in a sense, is Orlando Arcia, a guy that supposed to be, this really good player, can steal, hasn't done well. 261 batting average, 358 on base, and 348, which is 706, but he's struck out 9 times and has only stolen 1 base. So, for the final team, my team, which I've already somewhat talked about earlier, is the St. Louis Cardinals. And of course, you got to talk about the pitching first. And a lot of people have seen Jack Flaherty, Luke Weaver up there, and they've shown promise. Jack Flaherty, not so much. He has a 6.46 ERA, but he's still young. He still needs to develop. But Luke Weaver, 0.96 ERA. He's going to be a really valuable bullpen arm when it goes into the playoffs, if they do make it to the playoffs. But the guy that really has to show up might be the guy that took over their spot, which is Adam Wainwright, which he hasn't pitched in September at all. And that's where it's going to be the difference maker. If he can do well to, propel them to get into the playoffs, I think that's where it's going to show. And for the hitting side, it has to be, it's kind of hard looking at this and seeing all these good numbers. But again, it has to be, Randall Grichuk. 216, 250, 405 slash line, which is a 655 on base plus slugging. He has a bad BABIP of 250. He has a 189 ISO. He has a 59 runs created plus. He's struck out 12 times, making his K rate 30% and a 5% walk rate. But this is where it gets a little, what's been going on. If you're listening to what's said on the TV, oh, this guy's doing well, this guy's doing well. Yes, they've been doing well throughout the season, but what's going on right now? Tommy Pham has been a guy that has been in a lot of talk. He's hitting 250. Yadier Molina, the leader of the group, 241. And that's another guy that you kind of should be worried about. Even though he has a 780 on base plus slugging, he has a 224 BABIP and a pure 100 when weighted runs created plus. So, folks, that's going to do it. Like I've said, just to reiterate what I've said, it's going to be a tight race. And I think, in all honesty, it's, the Yankees are going to stay in the wild card. Boston's somehow going to pull it all out. Minnesota might not make it. The Angels have the opportunity to take over, especially with Minnesota playing the Yankees, even though Minnesota has the chance, will be facing divisional foes, which have been pretty much eliminated. They face Detroit, and the Angels face Cleveland, which will be harder. But I think Minnesota without Miguel Sano will be a difference maker. And it will be and on the National League side, like I said earlier, the Cubs won't be, taken out. They'll win the Central Division. Colorado might lose out in the playoffs with, Milwaukee taking it. And St. Louis, I said earlier this year, 86 and they're in. And right now they're at 78 with only 2 weeks left, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen to get into the playoffs. So anyways, folks, I have to say I did not have a beer tonight because I was soloing this one and I wanted to have fun without drinking, I guess. But anyways, if you're listening to us on our website, we are also on iTunes, SoundCloud, and TuneIn. If you did or didn't hear before our podcast started, we are part of the Tangent Bound Network, which is a host of multitude of genres that are, part of the pop culture realm. And even though Phil knows about it more than I do, but there's some really good podcasts on there. Phil always talks about the Salty Language podcast. That is his favorite on the Tangent Bound Network, which is, which is a really good show, and you should follow the Tangent Bound Network. They have a Twitter and they have their own website. If you want to contact us, we have an email at majorleaguebeers@gmail.com. We also have a Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We have Untapped, which is a beer social media app on your phone. So if you're drinking a beer and you want to log it, and if you want to take a picture, you can do it all on that. And if you want to contact us individually, my Twitter account is at RealAWS13, and Philip Corwin's is at Philco816. So again, it will do it for me here on the MLBeers podcast. I hope that you all enjoyed it. I did too. And hopefully next week we will have the better half on the podcast. So anyways, our motto, our creed, our saying Win or lose, there is always booze.